وما أرسلنا من قبلك إلا رجالا نوحي إليهم فاسألوا أهل الذكر إن كنتم لا تعلمون بالبينات والزبر وأنزلنا إليك الذكر لتبين للناس ما نزل إليهم ولعلهم يتفكرون.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. أما بعد, we've reached, or rather, not what we've reached, what we've done in the past, Masjid Taqwa, Kitab al-Nikah. We started a couple of years ago. For one reason or another, we were not able to finish. Many of the durus that we did do were lost. Some of them were destroyed, and some of them were preserved by voice and not in video. For one reason or another, and because of one brother and another, whose name we won't mention tonight, Bidnillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let's go back, Bidnillahi ta'ala, and leave off where it stops on the playlist, the chapter of marriage from Bulughul-Maram. And that is the 10th hadith in the chapter that's narrated from Amir ibn Abdullah ibn Zubayr from his father with regards to making an announcement on the nikah, making i'lan of the nikah. وجدته جميل. تفضل. You got it? تفضل.
وعن عامر بن عبد الله بن الزبير عن أبيه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال أعلنوا النكاح. رواه أحمد وصححه الحاكم.
طيب. Ahsant. Translation please.
Narrated Amr ibn Abdullah bin Az-Zubayr on the authority of his father, Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, make marriage publicly known. Reported by Ahmad and al-Hakim, rated as Sahih.
The number in the English translation says
834.
Hadith number 834 in the chapter of marriage. It says here, وعن عامر بن عبد الله بن الزبير عن أبيه رضي الله عنهم أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم قال أعلنوا النكاح. رواه أحمد وصححه الحاكم. Narrated Amir, the son of Abdullah, the son of Az-Zubayr, may Allah be pleased with them all. The Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam said, أعلنوا النكاح. أعلنوا النكاح. Said, make the nikah publicly known. Make a public announcement for the nikah. أعلنوا النكاح. The author of the book, Al-Hafidh ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he says, Rawahu Ahmad. This hadith has been collected by Imam Ahmad, i.e., in his book called Al-Musnad. In his book called Al-Musnad that we were discussing last night. The hadith genre, or the genre of hadith books known as Al-Musnad, is a hadith in which Imam Ahmad collected the narrations of many companions, and he put all of those narrations according to the companion, regardless of the topic matter. So if you're reading the Musnad of Az-Zubayr ibn al-Awwam radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, you're going to find in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad this hadith that's talking about marriage, and any other hadith that Az-Zubayr radiyallahu anhu narrated regardless of the topic. In how many places? One place. How many places you want to find it?
One place.
Just one. All of the hadith reported by who? What companion?
Zubayr.
And then the companion that Imam Ahmad put after Zubayr is going to contain his or her hadith in what? One place. Regardless of the what?
Topic.
Of the topic matter. As far as this hadith was collected by Imam Abu Dawood and his Sunan. Sunan Abi Dawood in English and in Arabic. Then you would look for this hadith in what chapter?
The marriage, book of marriage.
Perhaps the book of marriage. Some of the etiquettes of marriage. And before this hadith of Zubayr, it will be a hadith reported by Ibn Umar. And after hadith, it will be a hadith of Aisha. And then a hadith of Jabir. And then the Mursal of Hassan Basri, so on and so forth. Regardless of the name of the what?
Companion.
Of the companion. Have we got this yet? The difference between the Musnad and the Sunan. If you read this hadith in Sahih Bukhari, if it was in Sahih Bukhari, hypothetically, you would look for it in a special place. Nothing to do with the companion who narrated it. Naam. It says here, this hadith, he says, Rawahu Ahmad, is reported by Imam Ahmad in his Musnad. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal died in the 3rd century, well-known Imam. And has also been authenticated by Imam Al-Hakim, Abu Abdullah Al-Hakim Al-Naysaburi, rahimahullah ta'ala, who died in the year 405 of the Hijrah. The great scholar of Nishapur. He wrote a book called Al-Mustadrak al-Sahihain. That's another genre of hadith books. The Mustadrak. Not a Musnad, not a Mustakhraj, not a Sahih, not a Sunan, but a book called Mustadrak. Mim, Sin, Ta, Dal, Ra, Kaf. Istadraka, Yastadriku, Istidrakan. Obviously coming from what? 4 letters and then 3 letters. Now, which letters are what?
Me.
We have what? وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هِيَ وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْحَاقَّةُ وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْقَارِعَةُ درك أدرك خير inshallah. Al-Muhim, what's important here is that this book is called Al-Mustadrak, and it basically is a collection of hadiths that he feels another author of hadith failed to collect and compile. Hadiths that fulfill the standard. You should have collected these hadiths because they're just like the other hadith that you did put in your book. So he comes along behind that author and he puts them in his book. And he says that this hadith is authentic just like the other hadith in Bukhari and Muslim. Istadraka alayhim. There are hadith in which he feels and he says have the same validity, the same standard of authentication as Bukhari and Muslim. But for one reason or another, these hadiths are not collected in Bukhari and Muslim. So he comes behind and he puts them in his book. And he organizes these hadith just as the other people of books would organize them. Kitab al-Iman, Kitab al-Tahara, Kitab al-Salah, Kitab al-Janaiz. Everybody clear on this? It's called Mustadrak. Khair inshallah. That's enough of that. And he says this hadith is sahih. That the Prophet ﷺ said, A'linu nikah. He said what? Announce the marriage. Before we go any further, because this is a hadith, this is a class on hadith. It's not a dars of fiqh. This is not a dars of aqidah, this is a dars of hadith. And we study this book differently how we study Bulughul-Maram. Whereas Bulughul-Maram, all those hadith are in Bukhari and Muslim. It's a bit different, more summarized. Khairan inshallah. So this hadith, it says, A'linu nikah. It says, announce the marriage. Make the marriage well-known, publicly known. Before we move any further, the simple basic benefit that we take from this hadith is the obligation of announcing the marriage. Is that it's mandatory to announce the marriage. So if a Muslim heard about this hadith from a trustworthy source, and he didn't understand what the other scholars say, what the other madhab say, what the other hadith said, this is the only hadith that he knew about, and he took it from a trustworthy source, what will he do? What will be his responsibility? To implement it. To do what? To implement it. Is that when he gets married, to make an announcement, one way or another. When someone gets married, to tell them, there is a hadith that I read. It's ijma' of the ulama. No, don't say that. It's the most, I read a hadith, I heard a hadith, that the Prophet is quoted to have said, announce the marriage. And until he hears of something more authentic, or he learns that the hadith isn't sahih, or this or that, that is his responsibility to do. That is his what? Everybody understand this? It's just that simple. It's just that what? That simple when it comes to hadith and fiqh. You implement it, you act upon it, unless you know something else. As long as you got it from a trustworthy source. As long as you got it from a what? Trustworthy, reliable source. Everybody clear on this? You tell someone, I heard in a class, I learned in a class, that you should make an announcement for the marriage. And it shouldn't be done secretly. It shouldn't be done what? Secretly. Everybody clear on this? That's what we benefit from this hadith, starting off at home plate, home base. In the beginning, before we get to first base, that's the main faida from this hadith, is the obligation of announcing the marriage. The obligation of making the marriage what? Known. And the impermissibility of hiding a marriage and keeping it a secret. That's what we benefit from this hadith directly before we move any what? Further. Everybody got this? Everybody clear on this? Be the nice subhanahu wa ta'ala. Khairan inshallah. Everybody understand this? Is this the ijma' of the ulama? Are the other hadith in which it's permissible to keep the marriage secret? That's not what we what?
Talking about.
Not yet. Not what? Not yet. Khairan inshallah. And this is how we learn, and this is how you study. You take things step by step, piece by piece. And you take one hadith and add it to another. One fiqh issue and add it to another. One fatwa and add it to another. And that's how you make a pyramid of knowledge. That's how you make a what? And you can systematically deduce and extract. And you can systematically call upon whatever you want to call upon. So when I ask you a question, I can tell you my hadith. I can tell you no, it's haram. I can say what Imam Abu Hanifa said. You have the ilm. But it takes steps, takes pieces systematically. With discipline. With what? Discipline. And proper training. Khayr inshallah. So that's the main fa'idah from this hadith. Moving forward, reading from the classical explanation of As-San'ani rahimahullah subul as-salam, he says, عامر تابعي سمع أباه وغيره مات سنة 24 و100 عن أبيه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال أعلن النكاح رواه أحمد والصحة والحاكم وفي الباب أن عائشة أعلن النكاح واضربوا عليه بالغربال أي الدف أخرجه الترمذي وفي رواية أو في روايته عيسى بن ميمون ضعيف كما قاله الترمذي وأخرجه ابن ماجه والبيهقي وإسناده خالد بن إلياس منكر الحديث قاله أحمد وأخرج الترمذي وأيضا من حديث عائشة وقال حسن غريب أعلنوا هذا النكاح واجعلوه في المساجد واضربوا عليه بالدفوف وليولم أحدكم ولو بشاة فإذا خطب أحدكم امرأة وقد خضب بالسواد فليعلمها لا يضرها طيب. He says here, speaking about the narrator, Amir, the son of Abdullah ibn Zubayr. This man, Amir ibn Abdullah ibn Zubayr, is what we call a tabi'i. In the sciences of hadith, he's what we call tabi'i. He's from the salaf, the pious predecessors. Those people, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, inshallah, he's from those who studied with the who? Sahaba. His father was who? Abdullah ibn Zubayr, who was a? Who was Abdullah ibn Zubayr?
Zubayr son.
Zubayr
Awam son.
He was a Sahabi. And his father was? Sahabi. From the people who was what? Promised Jannah. From the Ashara al-Mubasharun bil Jannah. The 10 companions who are given the specific promise of what? Jannah. Paradise. His son was Abdullah. What was special about this man, Abdullah radiyallahu anhu?
The warrior.
What else?
His mom was Asma bin Abu Bakr.
We don't know anything about him? Abdullah ibn Zubayr?
He was killed by Hajjaj.
Fine. Anything else that you're sure of? Hajjaj fought him. And he killed him?
No, he died in the battle though.
What do we know about Abdullah ibn Zubayr? That's it? With regards to Medina and Hijrah, the youth of Islam?
He was the first to be born in Medina.
Anything else? We should know a lot about who? Abdullah ibn Zubayr. And our children should also know about this man. And also his father.
His mom was the two-belt.
Radiyallahu ta'ala anhum. Khayran inshallah. Al-Muhim right here, the narrator is Amir. He says that he is a tabi'i and he heard from his father and from other companions. That there isn't a break in the chain. This man Amir actually learnt and heard from his what? His father. He's narrating from his father. From his what? Grandfather. Amir, number 1. Abdullah, number 2. And number 3 is? Zubayr. Everybody got this? And this is a slice of what we call what? Al-Isnad. We call it what? Al-Isnad. The chain of reporters. Khalid from Abu Sa'id from Sufyan. Everybody understand this? Khalid from Abu Sa'id from Sufyan. Sufyan says Abu Sa'id told me that Khalid told me that Muhammad ibn Munir said kada wa kada wa kada. Everybody understand this? This is an example of a what? An isnad. Khairan inshallah. Tayyib. So therefore, in this isnad, let's make an example. Who's Amir out of you 3? Who's Amir? La. No way.
It's me.
The exact opposite. Sufyan is Amir.
It's going down?
Yeah, he's closest to me.
I always get confused.
You would be Abdullah ibn Zubayr. He would be?
Abdullah.
No. Zubayr. And I would be?
Rasulullah.
Rasulullah. Start again. Amir, the son of Abdullah, who's the son of? Zubayr. Abdullah ibn Zubayr. Everybody understand this? Everybody clear on this? Khalid and Abu Sa'id are both what? Companions. Amir is the grandson who is a what? Sahabi, right? He's a Sahabi too, right?
No.
He's a Tabi'i. He never met the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He never saw the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He heard from his father, and he says وَغَيْرِ and others from his father. Everybody understand this so far? No. I don't think we got this. I'm sure we don't.
I got
Tahir, once again, in the sciences of hadith, hadith is of how many parts? 2 parts. Isnad and metin. Not Tennessee, right? Isnad and what? Metin. Very simple, very easy. You hear something on the news. You're talking in the match earlier. Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton. You guys were talking about before the class. Where did you hear this from? Were you there? Are you with Donald Trump? Wherever he is? Are you with Hillary Clinton? Did you hear from her directly? Did you see her? No, you didn't. Someone brought you that information. Someone gave you that khabar, that news. Trump said A, B, C, D, E. Hillary Clinton said A, B, C, D, E. Everybody understand this? So you got it from someone. 1 person, 2 people, 3 men, women, Muslim, kafir, al-Muhim, somebody. Somebody what? Recognize. Somebody brought you the information. What are the qualities of these reporters? Liars, trustworthy, pious, righteous. Al-Muhim, someone brought you something. So what Trump said is what? The metin. That's the actual text of the hadith. That's the actual report, the story, whatever's being said or done. And those who brought it, CNN, ABC, so on and so forth, they're what? Isnad. They're reporters. The chain of what? Reporters. The reporter went to, saw the interview, then he reported it, publicized the information, published the information, etc. Everybody clear on this? So we have isnad and we have metin. We have isnad and we have what? Metin. So the isnad starts off with the companion. After the companion, it could be another companion. Or let's just say, after the companion, it's the next generation of Muslims. Those people who were not Sahaba, they didn't meet the Prophet ﷺ, they never heard the Prophet ﷺ, they never sat with the Prophet ﷺ. They were called Tabi'un. Singular being Tabi'i. Someone who was a Muslim, who lived and died upon Islam and studied with the Sahabi. And then he passed it on to someone else until it makes its way into a kitab. So it makes its way into a what? Kitab. Al-Bukhari reports from A, from B, from C, from the Rasulullah. Malik reports from A, B, C, from the Rasulullah. Ahmed reports from A, B, C, from the Rasulullah. Everybody understand this? Everybody clear on this? Khairan inshallah. So therefore, that's the first point of commentary is who was Amir? Amir ibn Abdullah ibn Zubayr. If someone asks you, do you know any narrators of hadith? Say, I don't know any narrators of hadith. You tell them what? Was a tabi'i. Everybody clear on this? Even if it's a small piece of information about his life, but you know that he's what? A tabi'i. Khairan inshallah ta'ala. Tayyip, moving forward. He then says here that this man, he died in the year 124. 124 years after the Prophet ﷺ's what? Hijrah to Medina. He passed away. So this is over 100 years after the Prophet ﷺ passed away. There's no way that this man is going to be a what? A Sahabi. Am I clear on this? He is a Tabi'i. Khairan inshallah. He then says, speaking on this hadith and the other hadith regarding the topic, he says there's another hadith that's been collected by Imam Tirmidhi, in which Aisha radiallahu anha said that it states, "A'linu nikah," publicize the marriage, make the marriage public. وَضْرِبُوا عَلَيْهِ بِالْغِرْبَالِ, and hit the duff, hit this type of drum, this type of instrument called the what? Everybody clear on this? Khairan inshallah. And he says, Isa ibn Maymun is one of the reporters in this chain, in his da'if. As Imam al-Tirmidhi said, there's another report collected by Imam Ibn Majah and al-Bayhaqi. Khalid ibn Ilyas is Munkar al-Hadith. And there's another hadith as well, reported by Aisha, that states, "A'linu hadha nikah," publicize your marriages. "Waj'aluhu fil masajid," and make your marriages in the masjids. "Wadribu alayhi bid-dufuf," and play the duff. It then says, and you should make a walima. Never leave off the walima, even if you only have one sheep to slaughter. Even if you only have what? One sheep to slaughter. It then says, and when a man asks a woman's hand in marriage, and he has dyed his hair, you dye your hair black, then you should tell her and deceive her not. Tell her and don't deceive her, don't trick her. In other words, you have a sit down. You go to marry a girl with her father, you talk to her, and your hair is actually what? White, or gray at least. White is a bit much. At least gray. Huh? You have some gray hair. So you put a little... No, not henna. Hadith says what?
Black.
Black. Henna is not what? Black.
We thought that wasn't permissible.
This is what we're getting into it right now, step by step. The hadith, it says what? We have to understand the hadith. The hadith, the first point from... There's not the hadith in the book. There's another hadith. It says, وَفِي الْبَابِ, supporting evidences. The first point of hadith says what? Number one is to do what?
Make it public.
أَعْلِنُوا هَذَا النِّكَاحِ. Number two, وَجْعَلُوهُ فِي الْمَسَاجِدِ, make it in the masjids. Number three, وَضْرِبُوا عَلَيْهِ بِالدُّفُوفِ, hit this duff. Number four, make a walima even if you only have one sheep. Everybody understands? Even if that's all you have. Not like today, thousands and thousands of dollars, wedding hall, food, tons of food, drink, this and that. The hadith says make a walima even if it's only with what? One sheep. Last but not least, when you ask a woman to marry you, tell her that you have
Great hair.
that you've dyed your hair and you're not that young. You're not that strong and young. Tell you, let the girl know that you have what? That you've dyed your hair. Everybody understand this? Everybody clear on this? Khairan inshallah. As far as the issue of that's right, we're not getting into that right now. What's important is from the style of making a sharh hadith, is that the author, he will speak on the narrators in brief, and he'll also talk about some of the supporting hadiths. Some of the what? Supporting hadiths. Not necessarily saying they're all authentic, but he's giving you more fa'idah. There's a hadith about it here, there's a hadith about it there's another hadith. Everybody understand this? Khairan inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously that hadith is very problematic for many reasons. Moving forward, he then says, دلت الأحاديث على الأمر بإعلان النكاح والإعلان خلاف الإصرار وعلى الأمر بضرب الغربال وفسره بالدف والأحاديث فيه واسعة وإن كان في كل منها مقال إلا أنها يعضد بعضها بعضا. He says all of these hadiths prove one main thing, and that is the command to announce the marriage. Al-i'lan, announcement, is the exact opposite of hiding it and keeping it secret. Everybody understand this? He then says, and it also shows the command to hit the everybody clear on this? And then goes on to say that these hadiths are not necessarily the strongest hadiths. They're not necessarily the what? The strongest hadiths. He says, however, his view is that when they are put together collectively, it proves that they are acceptable. That their hadith are what? One way or another. This is the view of the explainer, Shadi, As-Sanani, rahimahullah. He says that the hadith put together collectively are what? I'm saying now, when we talk about hadith science, for those who study Arabic and those who study in English, alright? Every Muslim understands the basics, should understand the basics. Is that there's something called hadith sahih and there's something called hadith da'if. There's something that you study called hadith hasan لذاته لغيره. Very long discussion. We're on a beginner's level right now. We're on just the beginner's level, okay? So the Hasan لذاته, when you study the basic books of Mustalah, such as Al-Bayquniyah, such as Nukhbatul Fikr, such as At-Tadhkirah, such as Taysir Mustalah al-Hadith. These are the basic books that students of knowledge study when they want to learn about Hadith. And it's very unfortunate for a student of knowledge to think that he's going to master a science and he's only studied the basic books, as many do. And they talk about Hadith, Da'if, Hadith, Sahih, and they've only studied these few small, basic, elementary books. However, as a beginner, this is what you study. You start taking baby steps. Baby steps. Piece by piece, step by step. No difficulties, no intricate discussions. Basic things. So in these basic books, you learn about something called Hadith Hasan. Hadith Hasan. And Hadith Hasan is basically Hadith Sahih, except for one of the conditions of Sahih, Hadith Sahih isn't there. And that is the narrators don't have the strongest level of hifd, of memory. A Hadith Sahih, when you learn in these basic books, they say 5 main conditions. The first condition is what? La. The first condition will be what?
Truth.
The chain of narration has to be continuous. It has to be what? Continuous. A heard, starting from the beginning. D heard from who? C, who heard from? B, who heard from? A. All of those letters, they met at least once. The sheikh met and came in contact with the student. The student came in contact and met with the sheikh. Vice versa. Everybody understand this? Until he passed it on, he passed it on, he passed it on. Just like the reporters. Where are you getting it from? You weren't there, you didn't see this person give a speech. Who are you hearing it from? Everybody clear on this? That's the first. The second condition that the narrators have to be what? Trustworthy. Including Islam, piety, sunnah, not making sins, things like this. Now, the third condition the narrators have to be what?
Good memory.
Strong memory. Strong memory. To the end of the conditions. So Hadith Hasan has those conditions, except that the narrators aren't the strongest when it comes to what? Memory. They aren't the what? The strongest. They aren't the what? They aren't the strongest. Everybody understand this? And this, in the elementary stages of Hadith science, is called Al-Hadith Al-Hasan Li-Dhatihi. Alright? Hypothetically. Then another type of Hadith Hasan is that which some of the ulama call Hadith Hasan Li-Ghayrihi. Is a hadith that's da'if, that's weak. It's not extremely weak. It's not terribly weak, but it's slightly weak. One hadith da'if with another hadith da'if, with a third, with a fourth, you put them together collectively, and these ahadith become what? Hasan. لِغَيْرِهِ and not لِذَاتِهِ. Alright, just like some food that you're eating. You have a cracker, a piece of fruit, some cream cheese, some celery, a small piece of meat, a small piece of cheese, a little bit of water, a little bit of juice. You eat these things individually, they're snacks. They're what? Snacks. They're not going to fill you up. But you put them together, and perhaps it will what? Fill you up. Perhaps. Everybody understand this? Once again, this is in the elementary stages. This is not what all of the ulama say. And we're not necessarily saying this is correct. And we're not necessarily saying this is what we feel and believe. We're just giving you the elementary stages. Hasan li ghayrihi. One da'if with another da'if, with a third, with a fourth, with a fifth. These ulama, they say that the narrations are now what? Hasan, acceptable. They're now what? Acceptable. But if they were individually looked at, they would be what?
Rejected.
Everybody understand this? This is with regards to the duff and these things like this. This is what he says about these hadiths. Everybody clear on this? Khair, inshallah. Moving forward. And it's very important for us to take these fawaid, as we said, those who study Arabic and English. There may be brothers who study Arabic, who study hadith science, they may not have the proper understanding of it like this. As some brothers, they say, it's very beneficial for those who speak English. There are people who speak Arabic and study Arabic, they don't have what? Proper grasp of it, and they can't explain it like this. Everybody understand this? So we always try to do in the class to make sure that's clear. So in hadith science, we have hadith sahih, we have hadith da'if, hadith hasan, hadith mursal, so on and so forth. And this is the fa'idah of studying these books. Even if you don't plan to specialize in hadith. But if you study fiqh, if you study qira'at, if you study the Quran, you have to learn the what? The basics of every science. The basics of what? Of every science. You have to understand the what? The basics of every science. You play football, you're a quarterback. Your height, your weight, your ability, your talent is totally geared for a quarterback. But you must know the position, the general function of the other, what? How many other players?
14, 15.
10 players. He has to know what a center is, right? He's not a center. He'll never be a center. It's not in his genes to be a center. Or left guard, or right guard, or cornerback, or a free safety, or nose tackle. But he has to know what, Jamil? The basics of all of those positions. It's illegal for him to do this. He can't, everybody understand this? He has to learn the basics of everything, of a kicker, of a punter. Even though he's only a what? Quarterback. He doesn't specialize in those positions. He doesn't spend and use and waste his time and mastering all those positions. But he must at least what?
Basic knowledge.
Know the basics of those things. Everybody understand this? The same applies to Islam. If you wish to be a student of knowledge, then you must learn the ABCs of what? Everything. That's the first step. Then the next phase is that you learn every science on a higher level. And perhaps a third time, then after that, bidinillah, you should focus on what? Specializing. Focus on what? Specializing. I learned 2 small books on Nahu, 2 basic books on Tajweed, 2 basic books on this. Now my focus is Hanafi fiqh. That's what I want to focus on. Because life is short. The demands of the student knowledge are many. I don't have the time to read Bukhari and Fulan and this one. I don't have the time for that. So I specialize in what? Hanafi fiqh. But that doesn't mean that I don't know the basics of Hadith. I don't know the basics of the other madhabs. I don't know the basics of Shafi'i madhab. I don't know the basics of Nahu and Sarf. Everybody clear on this? Everybody understand this? If you wish to study in Qira'at, a person, he calls himself a Qari, a Muqri. I give ijazah. I study the different modes of recitation. He said, if they ask him, what is a Hadith Mursal? He says, Wallahi, I don't know. But I can read Walsh and this one, that's Aib. That's a problem. Everybody understand this? If you ask a person of Hadith, what's Qira'at Walsh? What? Who? He doesn't know. He never heard of it. That's also what? That's Aib. That's a problem. Every talib al-ilm must know the what? Basics. Then he takes another step of learning the what? Basics. Another step. Before we go into specializing. That takes years. And then you gradually climb the ladder of talib al-ilm until you feel strong enough and well-rounded enough in everything. And then you say, I wish to focus on Aqidah. I wish to just study tafsir. I wish just to study what? Whatever else you want to study. Everybody understand this? Khairan inshallah. So therefore, these terminologies are very important with regards to hadith science. The author then says, وَيَدُلُّ على شرعية ضرب الدف لأنه أبلغ في الإعلان من عدمه وظاهر الأمر الوجوب ولعله لا قائل به فيكون مسنونا. He then says in the hadith, they also teach us the command and the permissibility of striking the duff. And that is because the duff, he says, it gives even a greater sense of what? Announcement. It's one thing, make an announcement, Khalid got married, and there being a walima, and there being what? Playing of the duff. Everybody clear on this? He then says, the next step is that the hadith clearly says, a'linu, make the announcement. Wadribu, it says, hit, beat, strike. The command makes the thing what? Wajib. Until proven otherwise. However, he says there, he says, As-Sanani rahimahullah says, there's none of the ulama that holds the view that it's what?
Wajib.
Mandatory. In other words, from the things that can take the amr, the command, and that's another point with regards to seeking knowledge. You cannot master unless you've mastered Arabic. You cannot study properly and understand properly and learn properly unless you've what? Mastered the basics and even more. And even more of the Arabic language. What is a fi'l amr? What is a fi'l madi? What is fi'l mudari? You have to understand these things. So the command proves that hitting the duff and announcing the marriage is what? Wajib. He says, however, there's no one who holds the view with regards to the duff that is mandatory. So this is from the things which can take the command from its asl. The asl is that it's mandatory unless there's ijma' that it isn't what? mandatory. And then it remains as being recommended. It remains as being what? Recommended. And if it was someone who did say that it's mandatory, then it will go back to the default. Khayr inshallah. He then says, ولكن بشرط أن لا يصحبه محرم من التغني بصوت رخيم من امرأة أجنبية بشيء مدح القدود والخدود بل ينظر الأسلوب العربي الذي كان في عصره صلى الله عليه وسلم فهو المأمور به. He says in the condition of hitting the duff with regards to the announcement, the walima, he says that it can't be nothing that is haram. It cannot accompany something, or cannot be accompanied by something that's haram. Something that's what? Haram. Such as, he says, such as a woman singing with a sweet sounding voice. A sweet sounding, tuneful, what? Voice. Everybody clear on this? Or making poetry or lyrics or rhymes or whatever the case may be, which have things that are what? Negative. Islamically what? Negative. Called into lusts, talking about alcohol, wine, women, whatever the case may be. Rather, this, he says here, this taghanni, because when a woman, she hits the duff, she's going to do what? It's going to be singing. It's going to be what? Singing. It's going to something that they're going to do. He says that which was done in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. He says al-uslub al-arabi, the original style of poetry that was done in the time of what? The Prophet ﷺ. He then says, rahimahullah, وَأَمَّا مَا أَحْدَثَهُ النَّاسُ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ فَغَيْرُ الْمَأْمُورِ بِهِ ولا كلام أنه في هذه الأعصار يقترن بمحرمات كثيرة فيحرم لذلك لا لنفسه. He then says, this is what the Prophet told the people to do. Not to sing and to dance and do things that are against the original way. The things that were done in what? The time of the Prophet ﷺ. He then says, rahimahullah, everyone just be patient inshallah. He says here, as for that which the people make up, and that which they have made up during these times, he says that's not what the Prophet commanded you to what? To do. That's not what you commanded to do. Khayr inshallah. He then says, speaking on things that take place at the walima, at the nikah, women, men, drums, singing, dancing, this and that. He says then something could become haram because of what accompanies that thing and not it by itself. In other words, the duff will be originally what? Halal. The poetry, the women will be what? Now, other things are done. Women are uncovered. They're singing in front of men. So on and so forth. Mixing, drinking. Then everything becomes what? Everybody understand this? This is a very interesting point here with regards to, number one, poetry. Jameel. Number two, singing. Number three, musical instruments. Number four, dancing. When it comes to Islam, what is the rule on these things? Is it permissible to dance? Is it permissible for a woman to sing? Is it permissible for a man to sing? Is it permissible for you to listen to musical instruments? The piano, the flute, the drum, things like this. Is this haram or is this halal? These things are all in one what? Circle. One what? Circle. Some of these issues, the discussion of them, the agreement, the consensus, the difference of opinion is greater than others. There's some issues in which the ring is like what? Very small. And there are other issues in which the ring is what? Much larger. Everybody clear on this? We're making a ring. That's all we're doing here with that. Nothing else. Honestly, everybody knows. People that take screenshots and things like this. We did what?
Gang sign.
No, not that. Worse than that. Just the ring. These other three fingers mean what? Nothing. Everybody make this clear. These other three fingers mean what? Nothing. All we're doing is making an O. You can't really see the ring if you do it like this. Everybody understand this? Hopefully that's clear. That's all we're what? Nothing else. And Allah is our witness upon this. Khayr inshallah. So therefore, what is singing? What is a song? Alright? And what is poetry? What do you do what happens when a person sings? It's melody. It's rhythm. What else? What's the content of a song?
Words.
Words. Good. What type of words?
Words that rhymes.
Words that normally or usually what? Rhyme. In other words, this goes to show that singing and poetry are directly what? Connected and related. And that the asl poetry, saying something that rhymes, or whether it doesn't rhyme, because all poetry doesn't necessarily have to rhyme. The different types of poems, as we all know. But let's stick with that which is well known. A poet is someone who makes some type of rhyming in his words. And not only do the words rhyme, but it makes total sense, or the lyrics have depth, things that need to be interpreted and understood. The poet is often someone who's directly involved with the culture of the people, the society of the people. Lyrics are often truthful, and lyrics are often lies. Everybody understand this? So that's poetry. Without no musical instrument, without singing, without dancing. Then someone takes a poem, someone takes words that rhyme, and then they do what? They raise their voices. And not only do they raise the voice, but it's also now with what? Melody, rhythm. And that now is given a new title. It's called what? Singing. Everybody understand this? Everybody call that? Then another stage and another level is when the poetry, the raised voice with the melody is added and combined with musical instruments. Wind, string, percussion instruments, etc. Everybody understand this? Hitting, striking, tapping, shaking, and vibrating. Everybody understand this? Everybody clear on this? And then after the music, with the singing and the poetry, comes dancing. Comes what? From dancing. Everybody understand this? Very important to understand these things systematically. And that is because this says, hit the duff. One may say, isn't that a type of a drum? Music instruments are haram in Islam. Musical instruments are haram. Everybody understand this? One may say, if it's permissible to say poetry, then what is haram about this type of lyric? If it's permissible, he says, to do something bil-uslub al-arabi, the Arabic style, then why is it haram to sing in a what? Everybody understand this? Everybody clear on this? Some issues are more severe than what? Others. Hitting the duff is not like other instruments. Instruments, singing, poetry, everybody understand this? It's a very, very, very long and important discussion. And if you don't understand this properly, you're going to fall into saying something's halal or saying something's haram without proper knowledge. You're going to say it's halal or haram without what? Without proper knowledge. It's permissible to listen to this. There's nothing wrong with that. Without knowledge. It's haram. You can't do this on the walima. You can't do this on the night of the nikah. Without what? The proper ilm. Because these things are in one line. It's permissible to say this, but then you tell a brother what? Astaghfirullah, you can't say that. And in reality, there's no what? No difference between the two. And all in one what? Circle. Everybody understand this? Khayr inshallah. So we're not here to discuss permissibility or impermissibility of these things, except for the duff. But we're here to show you what he says. He says, bil uslub al-arabi. Yundar uslub al-arabi. Everybody clear? And we also mentioned a hadith, or many others, in which the Prophet ﷺ and the Ansar and the Muhajirin were building the masjid. And the Prophet ﷺ says, Allahumma la aisha illa aisha al-akhirah. Faghfir lil-ansari wal-muhajira. And that those things, they do what? They rhyme. And the other things in which the Prophet ﷺ is quoted to have said, but the Prophet was never a poet. As Allah clearly says in the Quran. And it's unnecessary for him to recite what? Poetry. But the people, when they heard the Quran, they called it what? Poetry. It's a very, very, very long discussion. The types of poetry that are permissible, the types of poetry that are impermissible, listening to musical instruments, dancing, all these things, that's another topic of discussion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely knows best. We will stop here. We ask him for true knowledge, true understanding of the deen, and true implementation of that knowledge. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Jazakumullahu khairan.